Angelina Jordan is not operating in cycles of rise and fall. She is operating in a line of continuity, a line that moves forward steadily, without sharp spikes, without sudden collapses. And that kind of movement is rare, because most careers are unstable. They rise quickly, then struggle to maintain that level. But continuity removes that instability. It replaces it with direction. Now let's take this one step further. When continuity is strong, it creates predictability, not in exact numbers, but in trajectory. You can begin to see where things are going. You can begin to understand how value will grow. And that reduces uncertainty, which is one of the most powerful advantages in finance. Because uncertainty creates risk, but structured continuity reduces it. Now, as everything comes together for the final time, one truth stands clearly above the rest. This is not about chasing success. It is about building something that continues to succeed, even when attention shifts, even when trends change, even when the environment evolves. And that is the highest level of financial thinking, not reacting to the moment, but designing for the future. Because when a system is built with continuity, it does not need to restart. It simply keeps moving forward, growing, expanding. And over time, that steady movement becomes powerful, not because it was loud, but because it never stopped. And in the end, that is what defines lasting success. Not how high something rises once, but how long it continues to rise without losing its foundation. And that is exactly what has been built here. A system that moves forward, a system that grows, and a system that continues, no matter what changes around it. And once you understand continuity, the next level is something even deeper. Because continuity explains stability, but it does not fully explain expansion. And expansion is what turns a stable system into a growing system. So the next question becomes important. How does a system grow without breaking its structure? The answer is controlled expansion. Controlled expansion means growth that does not overwhelm the foundation. It means every new layer is added carefully, not randomly, not emotionally, not impulsively. And when we apply this idea to Angelina Jordan, something important becomes visible. Her career does not expand in sudden jumps. It expands in layers. Each layer builds on the previous one. Each step reinforces the last. Now let's break that down into financial logic. In most systems, expansion creates instability, because more income sources usually means more complexity. More complexity means more risk. But controlled expansion does the opposite. It increases value while maintaining stability. Now let's move deeper. 1. Layered income expansion. In financial systems, layering is critical. Layer 1, core income. Layer 2, secondary income. Layer 3, passive income. Layer 4, asset-based income. Each layer works independently, but also supports the others. In music systems like hers, this could include streaming revenue, YouTube monetization, catalog royalties, licensing deals, long-term rights value. Now here is the key insight. Each layer does not replace the other. It multiplies the total system value. So even if one layer slows down, the system continues functioning. That is financial resilience. 2. Audience to capital conversion. Most people misunderstand audiences. They think an audience is just attention. But in finance, an audience is capital. Because attention can be converted into streams, revenue, licensing demand, long-term asset value. But only if the audience is stable. And stability comes from emotional connection. Not hype, not trends, but consistency of experience. This is where Angelina Jordan's audience structure becomes important. Because her audience is not built on short-term virality. It is built on emotional recognition. And emotional recognition lasts longer than trends. 3. Asset transformation over time. Now let's move deeper into financial evolution. Every piece of music starts as content, but over time, it becomes an asset, and assets behave differently from content. Content is consumed. Assets generate value repeatedly. A single performance can generate streams, be replayed for years, be licensed later, be rediscovered globally. This is transformation from content asset. And this transformation is what builds long-term wealth. 4. Compounding reputation value. Reputation is not static. It compounds. Each positive moment increases future trust. Each consistent performance increases perceived value. Each emotional connection strengthens audience loyalty. And over time, this creates what finance calls reputation equity, which directly affects opportunity quality, deal strength, income potential, global positioning. For an artist like Angelina Jordan, this means her past work continues influencing future value, even without new releases. 5. Global redistribution effect. Now we move into macro-level finance behavior. Digital music is not localized. It is global, which means income does not depend on one economy. It is distributed across Europe, Americas, Asia, streaming platforms worldwide. This reduces dependency risk and increases system durability, because when one region slows, others continue. That is financial balancing. 6. Long-tail revenue principle. In finance, long-tail revenue means small earnings continuing for long periods, instead of large spikes that disappear. This is extremely important in music systems, because songs do not stop earning after release. They continue generating value years later, across platforms, through rediscovery, and long-tail revenue is what builds silent wealth. 7. System independence. At a certain point, strong systems become independent of daily input. They no longer rely on constant action. They rely on accumulated structure. This is where the system begins to stabilize itself. Income becomes less reactive, more predictable, more structural, and that is the highest level of financial maturity. Final shift, the real structure. Now, when we combine everything, layered income, audience capital, asset transformation, reputation compounding, global distribution, long-tail revenue, system independence, we do not see random success. We see a self-reinforcing financial ecosystem. And ecosystems do not depend on single actions. They depend on structure, time, and interaction between layers. That is why the system continues working even when activity slows. Because it is no longer powered by effort alone. It is powered by accumulation. And accumulation does not stop. It only grows. And that is the final financial truth behind this entire system. Not speed, not hype, not visibility, but structured accumulation over time. And once the system reaches a level of independence, the next stage is not growth anymore. It is self-sustainability, because growth still implies effort, but sustainability implies structure. And structure, once established correctly, begins to behave differently from everything else. It stops reacting. It starts maintaining itself. Now, this is where we bring everything together around Angelina Jordan in a more complete financial interpretation. Because at this stage, we are no longer analyzing just income streams. We are analyzing a self-maintaining, creative financial system. And systems like this are rare in the entertainment world. Most careers require constant input, constant promotion, constant visibility, constant output, constant reinvention. But systems built on layered value do not operate the same way. They rely on accumulated infrastructure. And infrastructure does not disappear when activity slows. It remains active in the background. Now, let's go deeper into how this actually works. 1. The background economy effect. Every strong digital artist has what we can call a background economy. This means, even when nothing new is happening publicly, value is still being generated privately. How? Through existing catalog streams, algorithm resurfacing, search-based discovery, organic sharing cycles. This is extremely important because it means income is no longer tied to activity. It is tied to existence of content plus demand cycles. And demand cycles do not require constant input. They operate independently. 2. Algorithmic memory systems. Digital platforms do not forget. They store behavioral patterns. When a piece of content performs emotionally strong, it is marked as reusable. That means it can be recommended again. It can re-enter circulation. It can be resurfaced years later. This creates a financial loop that repeats without new production. So performance is not a single event. It becomes a recurring financial trigger. 3. Emotional indexing value. Now we move deeper. Not all content is indexed equally. Platforms prioritize emotional response. Content that generates retention, replay, emotional engagement gets higher long-term visibility weight. This is where artists like Angelina Jordan gain structural advantage, because emotional depth creates algorithmic priority, and algorithmic priority creates long-term income flow. Not spikes, but cycles. 4. Time-distributed monetization. Most people think income is immediate, but in structured systems, income is distributed across time. A single performance may generate value in Year 1, views plus engagement. Year 2, rediscovery. Year 3, playlist rotation. Year 5 plus, nostalgic resurgence. This is what we call time-distributed monetization, and it is one of the strongest financial models in digital music because it removes expiration. 5. Identity locking effect. Once an artist becomes emotionally defined in public memory, that identity becomes locked, meaning people do not see random content. They see a consistent identity. An identity locking creates stable audience expectation, predictable engagement behavior, long-term brand retention. This reduces volatility and increases financial stability. 6. Cross-generational entry effect. This is a key long-term advantage. New audiences are not created once. They are continuously entering the system. Every year, new listeners are born. New viewers discover platforms. New users explore old content, which means old content gains new life continuously. This is extremely important because it means the system never becomes outdated. It continuously refreshes itself. 7. Passive expansion loop. Now we combine everything. The system now operates in loops. Content exists. Algorithms distribute it. Audience engages. Data reinforces visibility. New viewers arrive. Old content resurfaces. Revenue continues. And this loop does not require active maintenance once established. It only requires stability. Final structural conclusion. At this point, what we are seeing is no longer just a career model. It is a multi-layer financial ecosystem built on creative assets. And ecosystems behave differently from linear systems. They do not move in straight lines. They evolve in cycles. And cycles are self-repeating when conditions remain stable. So when people ask, how does she still generate value without constant output? The answer is not activity. It is structure plus memory plus distribution plus time. And when those 4 elements combine, the system becomes self-sustaining, not because it is actively pushed, but because it is structurally supported. And that is the final financial reality behind it. A system that does not depend on constant creation, but on continuous activation of past creation. And that is where real long-term value lives. And at the deepest level of this entire system, something becomes even clearer than all the layers we've discussed so far. Because when you remove all surface explanations, all numbers, all assumptions, you are left with one final structure, a self-reinforcing creative economy built on time accumulation. And this is where most people misunderstand how long-term financial systems actually behave. They assume income is produced directly, but in reality, income is often a byproduct of accumulated positioning. Now, let's apply this final layer to Angelina Jordan. At this point, we are no longer talking about individual income streams. We are talking about position-based income generation. meaning the system generates value not because something is actively happening, but because the position itself is valuable. 1. Position-based monetization. In advanced creative economies, position is more important than activity. A strong position means audience awareness already exists, emotional connection already exists, search demand already exists, algorithm recognition already exists. So even without new output, the system continues functioning. This is very different from effort-based income, because effort stops when activity stops, but position continues even when activity slows. 2. Emotional memory indexing. Now we go deeper into psychology. Humans do not interact with music as content. They interact with it as memory triggers. This means every strong performance becomes a stored emotional reference. And stored emotional references behave differently. They are revisited. They are reactivated. They are shared in cycles. They are tied to personal moments. This creates a repeating demand pattern, not driven by marketing, but driven by memory. And memory does not expire. 3. Passive rediscovery infrastructure. Now we introduce one of the most important financial mechanics in digital ecosystems. Rediscovery. Unlike traditional industries where products expire, digital content can re-enter circulation infinitely. This happens through algorithm resurfacing, social sharing cycles, recommendation loops, nostalgia-driven searches. So older content is never finished. It is only temporarily inactive. Then it reappears, which means income is not linear. It is cyclical. 4. Long cycle revenue waves. Now we expand further. Instead of one income curve, we see multiple overlapping cycles. Short-term cycle, initial release. Mid-term cycle, algorithm distribution. Long-term cycle, rediscovery plus nostalgia. Each cycle reactivates the same content differently. So a single performance may generate immediate engagement, delayed engagement, long-term resurfacing. This is what creates multi-layer income timing. Not one peak, but repeated waves. 5. Structural emotional advantage. Now we move into something deeper. Not all artists generate the same emotional weight. Some generate attention, others generate attachment. Attachment is more valuable financially because attachment leads to repeat consumption, long-term loyalty, organic sharing, sustained interest. And attachment-based systems are less volatile. They do not depend on trends. They depend on emotional continuity. 6. Self-reinforcing audience cycles. At this stage, the audience itself becomes part of the system. Because audiences do not just consume content. They distribute it. They reintroduce it. They keep it alive. So the system becomes artist audience, algorithm, new audience, repeat. This is a closed reinforcement loop. And once established, it becomes very stable. 7. Compounded cultural relevance. Now we go even deeper. Cultural relevance is not fixed. It compounds over time. As more people discover an artist, discussions increase, references increase, search volume increases, algorithm strength increases. This creates a compounding visibility effect, which means the longer the system exists, the stronger it becomes. 8. Financial time layering effect. Now we combine everything. We see multiple time layers operating simultaneously. Immediate income, streams, views. Medium income, algorithm cycles. Long-term income, rediscovery plus licensing. Extended income, catalog valuation. All layers operate independently, but also reinforce each other. This is why the system does not decay quickly. It expands across time layers. Final system synthesis. Now we bring everything together. What looks like a simple music career is actually a multi-layer financial architecture built on emotional memory, algorithmic reinforcement, catalog longevity, audience participation, time-based compounding, position-based value. And when all of these combine, you no longer have a career. You have a self-sustaining creative financial ecosystem. And ecosystems do not depend on constant input. They depend on structure. And once structure is stable, time becomes the multiplier, not the risk. And that is the final financial reality behind this entire system. Not speed, not output, not activity, but accumulated, self-reinforcing value across time. And once you understand the system at this level, there's still one final layer that sits underneath everything else. Not income, not structure, not even time, but control of narrative perception. Because in the modern creative economy, perception is not just branding. It is financial leverage. The way an artist is perceived determines how platforms rank their content, how audiences engage with it, how long it stays relevant, how often it is rediscovered, and how much long-term value it generates. And this is where the deeper structure of Angelina Jordan becomes even more interesting. Because her system is not built on constant narrative shifts. It is built on narrative stability. Meaning, the story people associate with her does not constantly change.